You know, the Harvey Weinstein rape trial is really turning out to be much different than any case I've ever covered here at Court TV through the years. And a lot of it has to do with the testimony and who is coming into this courtroom. I mean, what a contrast between the prosecution and their witnesses and the defendant. I mean, think about it. It's really kind of breaking down into kind of like a Beauties and the Beast scenario from the descriptions. And this comes from both sides. I mean, think about who the accusers are. You've got a series of young and younger actresses and models and people who want to break into the entertainment industry. And they're all testifying for the prosecution. And you go over and you look at what's at the defense table. It's Harvey Weinstein, a man who, admittedly by his own attorneys during jury selection, talked about the fact that he's not really that attractive at all and whether or not they would hold that against him. So I want to take a moment to talk about this contrast and how it may ultimately impact the jury. But let's first start by reminding you about who these prosecution witnesses are and some of the things they had to say. All right, folks. You know what we can do? Let's roll that video again and just let me describe some of the folks that we've seen, like Rosie Perez right there coming into the courtroom. Rosie Perez, an actress, very beautiful. And, you know, I don't know, age-wise, I don't know, maybe similar to Harvey Weinstein, a little bit younger, obviously. But some of these other folks who've come into the court, much younger than Harvey Weinstein. So you have a real contrast in terms of physical appearance, right? Should it make a difference? Does it make a difference? Let me bring in, joining us tonight, from Washington, D.C., Joe Scrofano, great criminal defense attorney. Joe, let me start with the premise first, the physical appearance. This is something the defense talked about, and they acknowledged the fact that Harvey Weinstein not the best-looking guy in town. But I've never seen a trial where prosecution witness after witness, whether it's an accuser or a supporting witness, young, attractive, beautiful. Obviously, it's the nature of the business. We're talking about Hollywood. We're talking about people that are in that business and people that Harvey Weinstein kind of surrounded himself with. But when you have one side against the other, Joe, does it make a difference? Do jurors take that into account, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, the fact that you've got beautiful women testifying for the prosecution and Harvey Weinstein sitting at counsel table for the defense?
Well, I think it's possible. You know, I think some jurors might take that into consideration. But in reality, I think it could cut both ways because you have witnesses here who are testifying about lavish parties and owning residences on different coasts. And I think that more than good looks, relatability can often be a factor in how a jury looks at a witness's credibility. And for some of these witnesses, it may actually go the opposite, and the jurors may not exactly feel like they can relate to the testimony, to the parties, and to the decisions that they're making.
All right, now we know that the two versions here. One is you know, rape. The other side is kind of like unwanted consensual sex and, you know, quid pro quo kind of world. Interesting that you mentioned that some jurors might hold it against the accusers. But it's not just accusers who are testifying for the prosecution. There's obviously celebrities, but the supporting witnesses as well who are supporting the accounts are also like at a central casting literally here. From your experience, do jurors generally find people who are more attractive, more credible than people who are less attractive?
I mean, I'll just say I don't think it hurts the prosecution's case that some of the witnesses may have been in movies, and I think what the real issue for most jurors is: are the witnesses credible? Are their stories consistent? They look at them, focus on their body language. think about how they respond to questions both on direct exam but also on cross-examination. Oftentimes jurors may be turned off by witnesses who are hostile to the opposing side or want to fight with the lawyers about answering the questions, or attempt to be smarter than the lawyers by trying to anticipate what the lawyer's getting at instead of just answering the question yes or no. So sure, I don't think having famous witnesses who are easy on the eyes are necessarily going to hurt the prosecution's case, but I give more faith to jurors that they're really looking for credibility and aren't going to be so starstruck that they just sort of take the testimony and absorb it without focusing more on the details.
All right, well, let's do the flip side of that, though, okay? The flip side is, all right, when you're looking for reasonable doubt, and it could be termed many different ways, but Harvey Weinstein is the man sitting at counsel table. I mean, the descriptions of him, his anatomy, the blackheads on his back, everything and the way he treats women, what he likes in terms of sexual appetite, all of it coming across as kind of gross, I think, for most people, right? Physically, the way he looks, admittedly by the defense, they mentioned this during jury selection, okay? Will jurors look past that face and just judge it on testimony and actions, or can they find a reasonable doubt for a guy that looks like that?
Well, if they take the judge's instruction and they properly apply the standard beyond a reasonable doubt, I think that the way Harvey Weinstein looks can support the defense's theory that these were sort of unwanted, transactional sexual encounters, and a number of witnesses have testified to having some consensual encounters and others not being consensual. And so I think that, the way that he looks could potentially fit in the defense theory that, these women were, trying to get roles. They wanted something, out of their relationship with Harvey Weinstein, and they were willing to do something they didn't necessarily want to do because they wanted to get something out of it. I don't know that that'll necessarily work, but I think the defense certainly could use that to fit into their theory.
All right, at the top of the segment, I want you to take a listen, Joe, and I got one more question for you, but it's on the back end of this. I want to take a listen to some of the testimony of these women who have come into court.
He led me into the bedroom and he shoved me on the bed. And I was trying to get him off of me.
What were you trying to do to get him off?
Punching him, kicking him, just trying to get him away from me. And he took my hands and he put them over my head. And he got on top of me and he raped me.
I'm going to ask you to go back and start again and tell us how the conversation went with Annabella Sciorra.
I told her, "Hey, Annabella, you want to hang out?" And she responded in a very weird voice, like she was whispering like this. I said, "What's wrong with you?" And she said, "I think something bad happened." And I said, "What do you mean something bad happened? What happened?" And she said, "I think I was raped." And the way she said it was so strange because she was still whispering. And she said, "I think I was raped," and her voice started shaking. And I said to her, "Do you think, or did it happen?" And she goes, "I think it was rape," and she started crying. And I said, "Well, who did it? Do you know who did it?" And she said, I can't, and I could hear her crying.
He held me down on the bed, and he forced himself on me orally. I was on my period. I had a tampon in there. I mean, I was mortified.
So what did he do?
He forced himself on me orally. He put his mouth on my vagina. I kept trying to tell him, no, don't go there, don't do that. I said I'm on my period. I have a tampon in there, and it was as if he didn't believe me. He literally pulled my tampon out.
He opened the door. I walked in, and on the coffee table, I noticed 3 stacks of paper. He kind of just cut to the chase and said, here's contracts for my next 3 films. I'll sign them today if you have a threesome with me and my assistant. When he said that, I laughed. I thought he was kidding, and he had kind of a crass sense of humor. But when I started laughing, he got really angry and started screaming at me. He said, "You'll never make it in this business. This is how this industry works." I don't have a vivid memory of exactly, but I remember after I was laid down, and he was on top of me, and I said, I can't. And he said he had a vasectomy, and I just went blank and looked off. He put himself inside me, and he raped me, and I just remember getting up. I don't remember from that moment between. I just remember getting up after.
His eyes changed and he was not there. They were very black, and he ripped me up from my chair, from the table, and he was screaming, you owe me, one more time. And he was dragging me into the bedroom. He sort of threw me down on the edge of the bed, and he was demanding that I take off my clothes, and I was begging him. I said, no, please, no, because I've already been with my boyfriend. And he said, I don't have time for the games. I had no strength. And he grabbed both of my ankles, and he pulled me so hard down by my ankles that I flew back. He pushed my legs apart and put his mouth on my vagina, and he started to lick my vagina, and then he stopped and he said something. I don't know what he said. And then he came at me to get on top of me, and then he penetrated me.
Joe Scrofano is still with us in Washington, D.C. tonight, and such powerful words from all these women, one after another, some Molyneux witnesses, some complaining witnesses. At the end of the day, Joe Scrofano, the defense is arguing consent, consent, consent. Does the contrast between what they look like and what he looks like at all play into that?
You know, I think that the testimony you just played is incredibly compelling, particularly speaking about, some of the physical resistance, the corroborating testimony. We call it out in D.C. a battle witness, when someone contemporaneously reports something to a friend or something like that. I think at the end of the day, the compelling testimony from the complaining witnesses and the Molyneux witnesses would probably carry the day. And I don't know how much it will actually play into the juror's mind the way that Harvey Weinstein looks. I don't think you necessarily need to get that far if you have compelling, credible testimony like you just played.
Joe Scrofano joining us from D.C. tonight. Great to have you on the program. I know there's another trial happening where you are, but we already know the ending to that one. The Weinstein case, nobody knows what's going to happen. Thanks so much, Joe.
That's right. Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, when we come back, we're going to get you back inside the courtroom to hear some more of that testimony from today. We'll also get a live report from Chanley Painter at the courthouse. Super important day, and really a lot of questions tonight about what could happen tomorrow. We'll talk about it when we return.